Okay, in this first video, what I'm going to take you through is how to answer research and development questions with a real focus on what the government does to promote research and development, because that's really important in your answers. So first things first, research and development is risky, and it's risky for two main reasons. One, when we do research and development, there's no guarantee of success. So there's no guarantee that it will lead to any specific benefits for the business in terms of better production, better products, or better methods of production. So there may not be any economic return for the business itself. And secondly, there's always the chance, I should say chance, that other businesses will copy the innovation without contributing to the actual research and development. So like you'll come up with something good and other people will copy it. So risk one, don't come up with anything good. Risk two, you do come up with something good, but someone else copies it. So basically, research and development is a positive externality in production. So the research and development itself, which occurs in production, has a positive externality for society. And those positive externalities is that other businesses can use your idea. So there are benefits for third parties more generally. So for example, if our research and development comes up with new robotics or new technology that improves productivity, other businesses then benefit from the reduction in production costs that come about through that those robotics. If it's about medicine, then that may cure or alleviate pain for future customers. So that research and development has third-party benefits for anybody who's sick or anybody who knows somebody that's sick as well. So basically, what the government tries to do is they recognise that businesses will under-allocate resources to areas with research and development because not all the benefits will accrue to them in terms of higher profits. So they aim to internalise the positive externality by providing financial incentives so more resources are allocated to research and development. So we innovate, so we come up with better ways to treat patients, so we come up with better ideas and better technology. So about 36% of all grants, subsidies and tax concessions that are offered by the government are to do with research and development. So the other parts are related to like helping out businesses, helping out farmers that are in need and a range of other things. But 36% are for research and development specifically. So essentially, why is research and development risky for businesses when there's no government intervention? It's risky for a number of reasons. There's no guarantees the millions of dollars will actually provide benefits for the businesses themselves in regards to efficient methods of production. They fail to generate an economic return despite the outlay. And another risk is that rival companies will come along and steal the innovation and benefit as well from without actually contributing anything. So there's an under-allocation of resources to R&D because of the high risk involved and the idea that other people can steal their ideas. So we don't consider the third-party benefits or the positive externalities associated with research and development, so that these positive externalities can include consumers that benefit from investment in health, lower prices. Okay, consumers benefit from lower prices from the research and development, and other businesses benefiting from the new production methods that we develop. All of those are positive externalities which we assume businesses don't take into consideration, so they would under-allocate resources to that area. So what the government does is they come along and they provide incentives. And you need to be aware of some key incentives that the government offer to try and encourage research and development spending. So my suggestion is you know one and you know one properly so you can articulate that at the start of your answer when you're doing questions. So there wasn't much mention of research and development in the 2019-2020 budget, but the key thing that businesses are still taking advantage of at the moment is this thing called a 43.5% tax offset. It's granted for businesses with turnover of less than 20 million. And basically how it works is it's very similar to 150% tax deduction. So essentially what that means is you can spend $100,000 and say you spend $150,000. And essentially what that does is means that you can reduce your taxable income. So you're inflating your expenditure, which reduces your profits and therefore reduces the amount of tax you have to pay. So make sure you articulate it really clearly. The businesses can get access to 150% tax deduction, and that allows them to inflate their expenditure and therefore reduce their cost of production and reduce their profits. Other things they're doing is they've put money into national research facilities. They're putting money continually into artificial intelligence and machine learning capabilities, so a lot of investment into that and a lot of money dedicated to that so we can stay at the forefront of those industries. And there's a $100 million advanced manufacturing fund, which is aiming to boost innovation, skills, and employment in the manufacturing sector. You're not going to memorize that word for word, but basically they've got a manufacturing fund, which is aiming to try and improve research, support engineers, and putting money into making sure our manufacturing sector stays competitive. That's the things I'll be focusing on within that answer. But if you wanted one, just this 150% tax concession allows you to inflate your expenditure, reduce your profits, and therefore pay less tax. Okay? So how is the government attempting to incentivize research and development expenditure? Through grants, tax offsets, and tax concessions. They're currently offering a 45% tax offset, for all companies with less than 20 million, and basically that works 150% tax deduction. So all businesses can claim 150% of what they actually spend, so all businesses earning less than 20 million. So if you spend $200,000, you can say you spent $300,000 and therefore reduce your taxable income by another 50%. This provides added incentive to invest in research and development, which will hopefully boost our productive capacity in the long term. Okay. Why are they similar to cash grants? Well, basically, they work in a very similar fashion because they leave more money to businesses with more money to spend on other expenses. So if a company records a $1 million profit and spends $300,000 on research and development, this allows the company to artificially lower their taxable income by an extra $150,000 and means they effectively pay $45,000 less in tax. So that $45,000 they save in tax is very similar or effective to a $45,000 payment. But basically, it doesn't really matter if you give them $45,000 in cash or they give them this ability to inflate their expenditure and pay $45,000 less in tax. Pretty much the same for the businesses. They don't care which one they get. You can give them a $50,000 grant or a $45,000 grant, or you can just reduce their tax by $45,000 by allowing them to inflate their expenditure. Okay, so what is meant by research and development? In your answer, distinguish research from development. Research and development refers to work directed towards the innovation, introduction, and improvement of products and processes. Research is the time and money spent by businesses to investigate new and better ways to produce and improve ways of producing products or efficient ways of producing. It involves exploring an idea to see if it will be viable. And then development occurs once research is proven to be viable and involves spending money on building on the research that's been undertaken. Okay, so that might include research into something of Apple and Microsoft developing something that they've researched in the past. So new methods of production, extending their product range, etc. High-tech companies generally spend more on R&D because there is constant pressure to ensure they're keeping up to date with their competitors in an extremely competitive environment. So firms that fail to innovate in these environments are often left behind because they can't keep up. Okay, once you've got the key things related to how we promote research and development, what are the main things you need to be able to do is explain how R&D helps to achieve each of the economic goals or the domestic macroeconomic goals. So basically, whenever you're doing a question linking to the goals, and I said this really clearly in class, but make sure you have this really key sentence that explains, all right, what does the R&D actually do? So the research and development allows us to come up with new ideas, the innovative ways of doing things. It allows for technological breakthroughs, improvement in artificial intelligence and machinery. There's some examples. Okay, or they can lead to better health outcomes, which boost productivity and participation. So make sure in your answers you have one really clear sentence before you link it to the goals about what research and development helps to achieve. New ideas, new innovations, breakthroughs in technology. This allows us to create new, robotics, etc., which makes us more productive. Okay, so in terms of the goals, basically encouraging innovation helps to promote efficiency. The innovation provides access to better quality resources, so try and link it to the quality of our resources, which allows us to expand our productive capacity and ensure production without inflationary pressures. So most of it's into new technology, which improves the quality of our capital resources, which lowers firms' production costs, makes them more efficient, and increases productivity. So they're your first links. Is one, it makes us more efficient, lower cost of production, willing to supply, because we've mentioned all this stuff that we've done in the first place. In addition to that, the lower prices make us more internationally competitive, which promotes jobs, promotes growth. It also promotes economies of scale because we can produce in larger output and send to a larger market because we're now the leader in that industry, and promotes non-inflationary growth. Helps to increase productivity, reduce costs of production, and boost our productive capacity so we can achieve long-term non-inflationary growth. If you do this well, it'll separate the rest of your answer to link it to productivity, lower prices, more efficiency, better quality capital, lower prices, and improved international competitiveness. In terms of price stability, you can argue that in the short term it can increase inflation because it leads to more jobs and more investment spending. You can also say that for growth, that in the short term it can lead to more demand. But in the long term, the better quality capital or better technology helps to achieve productivity, so output per unit of input, lowers costs of production, reduces price pressures, and helps us to achieve 2 to 3% inflation. In terms of full employment, in the short term, it can lead to more jobs for particularly research and development, but you could also argue that it encourages restructuring of production, so it may lead to more structural unemployment because the R&D encourages firms to be more capital intensive. But the argument is in the long term that if we don't innovate, a lot of businesses will shut down. Innovation not only creates jobs in new areas, and that's really important to link it to, it makes more skills, it allows people to develop jobs in other areas, but the fact that our prices are lower also makes us more internationally competitive, makes firms more willing to supply, but it also helps to create jobs because our prices are low and people want to buy our stuff. And it's also more demand, as I said, for researchers in the short term. So to summarize, short term, more demand for researchers, which boosts employment and developers, but it can lead to being more capital intensive and some people might lose their jobs. But in the long term, more jobs open up in other areas, so different skills become applicable working with the new technology, and the lower prices also boost our international competitiveness and create jobs in those areas as well, which should help us to achieve full employment. Living standards basically raises efficiency, boosts real GDP and incomes, should help to create jobs, which improves incomes, leads to lower prices, which boosts material living standards. If the research is in things like renewable energy, then it should reduce emissions and reduce climate change, which is, again, good for our non-material living standards. So overall, it creates more jobs, reduces unemployment, improves health outcomes, and should help to improve our living standards. So here's a question from last year's exam, just to show you how to approach a question like this. So it said, select one of the following policies, aspects of budgetary policy. So one of the things we'll study, the second two we haven't looked at yet. Explain how the selected aspect is designed to influence aggregate supply and the achievement of one of the domestic macroeconomic goals. So in terms of what they said about these questions, students found it challenging. It appeared very few were able to successfully link the aggregate supply. So that's all about boosting our productive capacity, the quality of our resources, willingness to supply. Students need to improve the explanation linked to research and development and aggregate supply, rather than just stating it will happen. That's what I'm focusing on a lot here. Okay, that idea of don't just say, yeah, we'll research, then it'll happen. That's when you go back to all the stuff that they're doing, which boosts the productivity. So the new technology, the innovations, the improvements in the health outcomes, that's what I'm really focusing on, because that's what students don't do well, including students that in their SAC last year. The rest of it talked about welfare reform. So high scoring approaches to research and development said, explain what they're doing. So research and development grants up to 150% tax concessions will help businesses invest in research and development, which should help to lower their cost of production, reduce their taxable income, and that encourages technological breakthroughs. Provide some examples. Such breakthroughs, which you've just provided examples of, help become more efficient, helps to boost productivity, shifts the aggregate supply curve to the right, and that allows companies to produce a greater volume of goods and services, which improves the goal of strong and sustainable growth. There's a lot of other things you could mention, but they're the main things. Last question, explain how R&D helps to achieve the macroeconomic goals. So the key macroeconomic goals are full employment, strong and sustainable growth, and low inflation. Define the goal. Encouraging innovation can promote new ideas and better quality resources like capital and labour, which boosts our productive capacity, helps to increase greater outputs at lower prices, boost our international competitiveness. This should lead to increased aggregate demand and achieve strong and sustainable growth. So prodding to productivity, willingness to supply, better quality resources, lower prices, increased international competitiveness. In terms of the other goals, you define the goal, 2 to 3% the CPI over the course of the business cycle. Better quality capital helps to achieve more output per unit of input, lowers average cost of production, which reduces prices. And then the last one, the goal of full employment, no inflationary pressures, 4 to 5%, no cyclical, can lead to restructuring and can lead to more capital, which can hurt unemployment in the short term. But in the long term, it should create more jobs in a variety of areas for those with 21st century skills. So there's more jobs in other areas to work with the new technology, but there's also increased international competitiveness, which stems from the lower prices, which boost the demand for labour. Thank you.